Do you want to draw your Fakemon in the official Pokemon art style, but you're just not sure where to start? Never fear, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Fakemon Art Academy. This will be a series where I can hopefully teach a trick or two when it comes to making your very own Fakemon art. If you have any specific requests for tutorials, then leave them in a comment below and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss class. Today's lesson will be drawing in the Pokemon art style. If you're a channel regular, then you'll know that I try to be as accurate as possible to Game Freak when I'm drawing my Fakemon art, and I think I'm pretty close. I have some qualifications in the field, if you would say so yourself, myself, you get what I mean. I do get a lot of questions from you guys asking me what programs I use and what I use to draw and how I make my Fakemon resemble the art style, so we're just gonna kick things off with my setup. First of all, I have a Windows 10 PC, so if you use a different system, then that might affect your access to the following programs. For my art software, I use a program called Paint Tool Sci. I use the first version as well, not Paint Tool Sci 2, I just never upgraded, but they are super similar, so if you use the second one, then that should also be absolutely no problem. You don't need to use the same program as me, and I will be sharing my brush settings, so hopefully they translate into whatever program you use so you can replicate it the best you can. If you don't have an art program and you don't want to commit to buying Paint Tool Sci or any other paid program, then I would recommend getting Credit, which is often regarded as the best free software out there. Other good ones include Fire Alpaca and GIMP. Don't be afraid to try them all if you're unsure which is the best fit for you. You just want to make sure you're comfortable with the feel of the program and also not overwhelmed by the UI. If you are using an art program for the first time ever, I recommend just playing around with it, getting to know all the settings before you get started with your Fakemon art. For my hardware, I use a Wacom Intuos Pro Large. I've had it for 5 years now and it has not failed me. By the way, there are no sponsors on this channel, so if I hard recommend a product, it's just because I like the product. But yeah, I've had this tablet for ages and I really like it. Before that, I had the medium-sized Intuos Pro, which was also really good, and it's a cost-effective option for those wanting to use a Wacom tablet. If you're not sure which size tablet is the best option for you, then the best way to choose is by matching your screen size the best you can with the size of the tablet. You will have a more comfortable experience using a small or medium sized tablet if you use a laptop, and a medium or large size if you have a desktop. Also, tablets are not very cheap, especially not the Wacom models, so it can be a bit of a financial commitment to buy one for the first time. I really highly recommend looking secondhand first. I was very lucky in the sense that my friend just lent me their tablet to have for a couple months before I made the decision to purchase my own, so I highly recommend getting secondhand if you can before you make the purchase for a brand new one. Another option for you could also be an iPad with an Apple Pen. I know a lot of people who use this, and you can use a program called Procreate. Or you could honestly just use a computer mouse. It's tricky, but it can be done. Alrighty, it is now time to fire everything up and get designing. Designing your Fakemon is a very good place to start. I usually begin with a general idea and usually a typing, but today I'm actually going to remake an old design of mine. Here we have Verzatic. It is a Pika clone and an electric glass type, which is one of my very own fake Pokemon types. If you have a Fakemon concept that you want to try out with this tutorial, then that is great, but if not, then feel free to draw Verzatic with me. So, before we get started with our sketch, we're going to gather some reference material so that we can have some things on screen to help our vision come to life. For Verzatic, I am browsing some stock images of glass. I found a really nice glass ball that shows some varied tones and colors, and also this glassy texture, which I might find some good purpose for as well. Perhaps it'll come in handy when I shade and highlight my piece. Next, I need an image of all of the Pika clones so that I can make sure my updated design fits more closely with the existing official pieces. That's just because that's how I want this Pika clone to look, like the other ones. You don't necessarily have to follow the same design conventions as Pokemon as well, but for me at least, this is part of the fun, and it really does help the design look nice and official, which is what we're aiming for. Now I'm pasting in my old artwork of Verzatic and its pre-evolved form, Vizzy. I love them both very, very much. They're some of my first ever Fakemon that I made almost 10 years ago, so I'm excited to get into the sketching process. For my Fakemon art sketches, I've actually been using a really thick Sharpie looking brush, but it has been holding my designs back, so I've recently made the switch to a pencil, and I've been loving it. It feels like I'm drawing on paper. Here are my pencil brush settings. If you use Sai, then you can copy them directly, or if not, then you can cross-reference for the brush settings on your own art program. I've started by identifying the key shapes in the design. For Vrzatic, we have two circular shapes that make up the body and head, and then I'm using lines to map out where the legs will be, and some smaller circles to identify the joints, in this case the ankles. After mapping out the skeleton, I'm very loosely drawing in the legs and then just using a lasso tool to select those specific parts so that I can warp them around the body to make them look just right. I often warp parts of this sketch as I'm progressing with it because it makes it easier to build on more anatomically correct sketch work, but you can also do this after you've done an initial sketch if you find that easier for your own work style. Next, I'm referencing my Pika clones to see how their arms look so that I can make a decision for Vrzatic's arms and hands. I like how Emolga's sort of start thin around the shoulder and then get wider out to the hand, so I'm gonna do just that. I've also marked in where the actual hand starts. This design will have a different color for the hands since Vrzatic has no fingers, so, you know, I want something to kind of separate the hand from the arm. Moving up, I am now adding in ears. Pika clones have a variety of ears, so there isn't really a set style that I need to consider. I actually have a lot of freedom with this part, so I'm staying true to my original's ears, but I'm making them just a bit wider and slightly pointier. The tail is quite large, being roughly twice as high as the body as I can see on my original artwork, and the same is true for a lot of the other Pika clones, so it works out here. When you're approaching the face, it's always a good practice to lightly draw in some reference lines so that you can get the facial proportions correct. I know Vrzatic has a round head, so I imagined its depth and drew curved lines as if I was drawing along the surface of a ball. This will be the case for most heads that you end up drawing. Now, when I draw in the eyes, I can actually see if I'm placing them correctly and drawing them at the right scale. The eye that is closest to us will be slightly larger than the one that's slightly further away. With the center line, I can accurately place the nose and mouth, and with my second horizontal line, I can place the cheeks. Now, once you have drawn in the fundamental parts of your design, oftentimes this will be the body and face, you can now sketch in any accent details that your Fakemon has. Vrzatic has some circles on its ears and also on its belly. It does have them on its feet in the original design, but I'm not bringing those into my remake because I think it makes the design just a little too cluttered. And I'm just thinking ahead in the sense that perhaps I could reimagine this accent detail with the highlights and shadows instead. I am now just touching up a few things and also rotating my design in case it may be lopsided, which can happen very easily. A really quick way to check the balance of your artwork is to just flip your canvas horizontally so that you can see the mirror image. If it looks off or lopsided, then you might need to warp it back into place. I find that warping the image while I have it flipped really helps me get the proportions correct on the first go. If it looks fine after reverting the canvas back to normal, then it should look solid to fresh eyes. The reason artists do this is because you get so used to what you're drawing that you can easily become somewhat blind to any artistic or design errors, so flipping the canvas effectively makes you see your work through the eyes of someone who's never seen it before. Well, you know, in a very simulative kind of way. I am now confident in my sketch and I am happy with my design. It's now time to block in the colors. Now, my sketch lines are not totally opaque, which is fine for when I'm drawing, but it's not so great when I want to add in some color since you'll just see the color bleed underneath the line art. To fix this, I am selecting everything on my sketch layer, just a classic Control-A, and then I'm copying and then I'm immediately pasting it in place 3 or 4 times. Most art programs will automatically generate a new layer when pasting in copied elements, so if that happens to you, then just merge all of those layers until you have one layer with just your sketch, and hopefully thicker and opaque lines. Now that my lines are bolder and opaque, I'm going to make a new layer underneath my sketch layer and then block in the colors. If you're having trouble deciding what's the best color for your design, then I recommend referencing your researched images, or even just using the good old internet to find a good color palette that you can eyedrop or even just base your Fakemon's colors on. Verzatic originally has a pretty washed out color palette, and I really want it to be more vibrant, so I'm starting off with some really bold colors, and then I'm adjusting them as I go to either add more saturation and vibrancy or even to shift the hue slightly. After coloring in, I am going to very roughly block in some shading so that I have a reference point for the light direction of my artwork. If you're having trouble keeping your lighting consistently in one direction, then it does genuinely help to just draw a little sun in the corner of the page where the light is coming from, and then just imagine that that is your spotlight. From there, you can try and visualize where the light would realistically hit your Fakemon, and then you can draw in where the shadows would form. Once you have a sketch that is all ready for making your polished artwork, we can now move on to the line art and coloring. For pretty much every single generation, Pokemon's official artists, mainly Ken Sugimori, have used a rough brush for Pokemon official art line art. If you zoom in to literally any Pokemon art, you'll see that the line art is almost grainy and fuzzy, and it really resembles the lines of a traditional pencil or ink pen. This is the brush that I use for almost all of my line art. Feel free to copy my settings. If you use Photoshop, then there are brushes that are available on DeviantArt by Midnight Sketch Art, and they may be also compatible for other software, so it's definitely worth checking out. I'll leave a link in the description. Before you get started on actually drawing out the line art, you're gonna need to know what size your brush should be. The best and easiest way to find this out is by opening up the official art of a Pokemon that has a similar size to your Fakemon. In my case, Verzatic and Morpeko are roughly the same size, so I've opened up Morpeko's art. Next, you're going to change the image size to the same size as the canvas you're working on. I personally work on a 3000 by 3000 pixel canvas for my polish work. I find it gets a consistently good result for my artwork's resolution. If your art program gives you the option for DPI as well, then I recommend setting it at 300. Any more than that is unnecessary, but any less might make your artwork a lower resolution when you export it. Once you have matched the size of the official Pokemon art to the size of your Fakemon's art, you're going to change the opacity of the artwork layer until it's fairly transparent, and then add a new layer on top. On this new layer, select the line art brush you're going to use for your Fakemon's artwork, and then just start tracing over the lines. The idea is that you want to trace and then adjust your line art thickness so it's as close as possible to the thickness of the official artwork. Keep repeating this step until you're happy with the size of your brush. Now that we have the right size brush, it is time to go back to your Fakemon artwork. Make the sketch layer somewhat transparent and then start a new layer for your line art. I like to use layer groups for my polishing work as well. Grouping all of my polish work allows me to have as many layers as I need, but just in a nice little package that I can toggle on and off as I please. It will also let me move all of my layers at once without having to link them all together. The line art method is fairly simple. You don't need to be that perfect. The main thing you need to pay attention to is that all of your curves and other circular shapes aren't too wobbly. Unless it's like a rock, in which case go as rough as you want. For Verzatic, I'm keeping the curves of its head and body consistent and smooth. Since it is a pretty rough art style, consistency and neatness in drawing the shapes is important, because if things start to look wonky, then that is something that can derail the visuals entirely. This is why I draw the same circle for 100 hours, and sometimes my videos come out on a Fakemon Sunday instead of a Fakemon Friday. There are official examples of wonky art as well. Remember Sprigatito Eyegate? They mocked my cross-eyed queen. If you're consistently having trouble with drawing stable line art, then just use the stabilizer tool. I'm confident that most art programs have one. In Paint Tool Sai, it is on the top toolbar to the far right. If you're using Paint Tool SCI and you just want to use the same stabilizer that I use the S-4 setting. But I might draw completely differently to how you draw. We all do different motions, so I recommend just experimenting with all of the different options and just seeing what works best for you. Another example is my artwork of Scarffles 2 from my second video on this channel. The lower body isn't facing in a natural direction in relation to the face, and the wings are positioned completely incorrectly. Maybe I'll redraw it in the future. Like this video for Scarffles 2 too. You might also want to consider the color of your line art as well. Most Pokemon artwork has black line art. For Verzatic, because it is entirely made of glass, I gave it dark gray line art. Other examples of when you might want to change the line art color is for when you're drawing fire, electricity, or other forms of light energy, gemstones and crystals, or ice. Sometimes the outer line art can be slightly thicker than the inner line art. I'm drawing the line art for the eyes, facial details, and other inner accent details with a slightly thinner brush than the outer lines of my Fakemon art. Whether or not this is done in official art is kind of touch and go. I think every artist that works on the key art does it differently, so this is purely just a preference/feeling thing. If you feel like you should do thinner inside lines, then go ahead, but if not, then that is fine too. Coloring in your Fakemon artwork can be a lot simpler than you may think. A lot of people just go in and paint between the lines, but I don't have time for that. Enter the magic wand tool. Now, I am aware that this tool works better in some programs more than others. Personally, it works amazingly in Paint Tool SCI. Sadly, I haven't had much luck in Photoshop, but I don't draw in Photoshop, so if you have found a good tolerance for magic wanding your line art, then please share your tips in the comments. Now, what I do is go in and select one color area at a time. I then create a new layer underneath the line art and use the bucket tool to fill in the area with the right color. Normally, I just eyedrop it from my sketch, but if you're not colorblind, then perhaps it's just as easy to select the same color from your color wheel. After I have one color in this case it was the light gray, I then go in and select all the areas with, say, the light green, and then it's all the yellow, and so on and so forth. Sometimes the eyes will have an accent color that isn't separated by line art, so you can't really magic wand that. So to circumvent that, once I have my base eye color filled in, I then go in with a non-blending brush and just draw in the accent color on the same layer. Same layer as the color, not the same layer as the line art. Don't color in on the same layer as your line art. You won't be up to shade. But now that all of the line art and color work is done, it is time to move on to the final step, shading and highlighting. Alas, we have reached the final stage in creating our Pokemon-styled Fakemon art, and probably one of the hardest things to really nail, the shading and highlighting. The art style between generations 4 and 6 are fairly consistent with this area. More often than not, you'll find that Pokemon art has a cartoon-style shading. This shading style is often emulated in 3D models where it is called cell shading. The breakdown of this shading style is fairly simple. Firstly, if you didn't do so in your sketch, you'll now want to decide on a light direction. It's fine to be experimental and dynamic in your light direction, but do keep in mind that most Pokemon styled art is lit from the top left or top right. So if you really want to make it look super official, maybe just go with one of those. Next, select the color that you want your shading to be. I always go for a cool dark blue. I find it complements a wide range of colors and also won't dull any of your colors or wash them out, which can happen often with black shading, and that's because it turns to gray when it's made more transparent. If you want to bring out the vibrance of your colors in the shading, then you could also use complementary colors for your shading. Complementary colors are those that sit directly opposite on the color wheel. There are often debates and disagreements when it comes to which colors complements which. Everyone seems to have a different answer, and there's actually a very good reason for that. So side tangent, there are many many different color spaces that we use in many different ways. In art, there are generally 3 main color spaces that will be used, and they have very different applications. Here is a basic rundown. RGB is an additive color space, which means in addition to mixing its primary colors, it adds white light to create the other colors within its space. These primary colors are red, blue, and green. This is the standard for computer screens and is normally used for web graphics and artwork that will only remain digital. If you ever plan to make prints of your digital artwork, do not make it in RGB. For that, you will want to use CMYK. This stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key black. This color mode is the golden standard for printing. Unlike RGB, which is an additive color space, meaning it adds white, CMYK is a subtractive color space. That means it absorbs or effectively removes white. When CMYK colors are stacked and layered, they absorb more light, which then produces the end result. If you've ever put color paper in your printer and wondered why the print looked completely different to how it does on your screen, then this is why. Because the colors are being stacked on the color of the paper and not white. Unlike the page on your design program or the canvas on your art program. When you see a business card with vibrant colors printed on black card, more often than not, the black would have been printed on as well. Unless you have very incredibly expensive white toner or ink, the color of your paper will always replace white. And finally, we have the RYB color space, which is red, yellow, and blue. This is another subtractive color space, and it is used in analog art forms such as painting and color pencils. If you went to art school and dealt with traditional physical art forms, then these are the color pigments you would have used. Anyways, color theory tangent over. Probably could have done it in the color section, you know. Whoops. My point is, when you ask someone, what's the complementary color for blue? Their answer could be yellow, orange, or red. So next time you have a disagreement with someone over this, take a step back and just ask them, what color space do you use? And then they'll probably be like, what does that mean? So, right, let's shade the Pokemon. What I do is that I start on a new layer and then I draw in all of the shades. I use the magic wand tool to select specific areas of the artwork so that I stay within the lines. This is a preference thing. You can approach this however you want. An alternative way is using a clipping mask, but for that to work, your layer needs to be directly above the color layer. Once I have my shading drawn in, I am then going to copy the whole layer and then paste it in place. Paint tool size should just paste in place on its own with Ctrl V, but some programs, especially Adobe programs, might paste it in a different spot. So to make sure you're always pasting something in the exact same position it was copied, use the shortcut Ctrl Shift V. If you don't like using hotkeys or the hotkey just doesn't work in your program, then just navigate to the Edit tab and select Paste in Place. This should work for most art programs. I am then going to set both of my shade layers to the multiply layer filter, and then I'll change their opacities until I get the level of shading that I want. Now with a small brush, I am going to go in and erase the edge of all of my shades. This is a signature feature of the cell shading style. You'll find this in just about every single Pokemon artwork. The shades always feather out in one or more stages. They never abruptly end. The highlighting can be a lot trickier, but I'm going to be with you every step of the way, so don't worry. Most Pokemon artwork will have these very sharply layered highlights. Sometimes they trail off into other parts of the artwork, or they're simply just in one, normally circular spot. The first thing we want to do is, of course, add a new layer somewhere between the color and line art layers, typically above the shade layer. We then want to take a fairly flat circle brush with no minimum size. We want it to be as consistent in shape and scale as possible. Now we're going to select the color white. Some people do prefer a very light yellow as well, but I honestly think it's not as versatile. I've seen more accurate results just using plain old hashtag triple F. It's so cringe. I start by boldly painting in my designs, which is very similar to how I do the shading, except I usually make them a lot bigger than they need to be, because once we're done, we're gonna to do some feathering back. So just go in, keeping your light direction in mind, and very liberally add light to your Fakemon artwork. The key spots you don't want to miss are the forehead, ears, and usually the ends of any hair, ribbons, hands, feet, whiskers, you get the idea. Anything that kind of floats around. Now that we've blocked all of that in, we're going to make our brush less dense. I usually take it down to around 50% density / transparency, whatever your art program calls it. Also, you're going to want to change the color you're using to transparent color. On Paint Tool Sai, it's just this little button here. It will change everything to transparent. It means you can still use your like regular brush settings, but just as an eraser. It's kind of amazing. If you're using a different art program and this isn't an option for you, then just use an eraser tool at a similar size to the brush you used for your highlighting. Now you'll want to make gentle brush strokes along the edges of all of your highlighting and sort of slightly work your way inwards, but not too far. We're just doing this little by little until we get the desired effect. If you're new to this method, then it will take a lot of patience and practice for it to come naturally, but eventually you will just get a feel for it, so to speak. If you erase too much, no worries, just lightly add some more white back in, perhaps even more than you need, and then repeat the process of taking it away with light brush strokes. In fact, the more you keep layering thin pieces of white and then partially taking them back, the more you'll start to achieve the desired look. It's hard to get it looking super official, but it's not actually as hard as you think to totally mess it up, if that makes sense. And again, don't worry if you don't always get the result that you want in the end. I have plenty of Fakemon art where sometimes the highlighting just didn't hit right. A really important thing to know is that this highlighting method is difficult, and when you're making art, a really important lesson to learn is knowing when to stop. I usually just keep going until I can look at it and be like, you know what, this is fine. If you can't stop yourself and look at it and be okay with the result that you have, then I recommend stopping right before the point where you want to start it all over again. Just leave it on that point and then use your next artwork to continue your practice and make it better than the last. If you try and nail it on your first piece over and over again, then you'll never finish anything. I have over 200 Fakemon and they're not exactly the Mona Lisa, but you'll find that as time has gone on, my abilities with the art style have drastically improved. It's always a work in progress, and if you just know when to stop and move on to the next piece, then you'll also have hundreds of artworks that show your own improvement too. It's honestly a wonderful thing. Anyways, I didn't expect this step to carry out for as long as it did, but I truly hope it helped you learn the ropes a bit more with shading and highlighting, because I know a lot of people have trouble with that step. But anyways, that seems to be a wrap on the first ever class of the Fakemon Art Academy. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If this tutorial helps you in any way, then please let me know in the comments and tag me in the Fakemon artwork that you end up making on Bluesky, Instagram, or even in YouTube posts, because I truly love seeing all of your creations. You can also post on my community tab on this channel. You guys have tagged me in your art before, and I'm always blown away by how amazing all of your Fakemon are, so please keep sending them to me. I genuinely love to see them. If you want to learn something more specific, then please let me know in the comments below, and also like other comments that request something that you want to learn, because it will really help me in deciding which tutorials you guys will get the most out of and have a genuine interest in. I want to help expand the Fakemon space even more and encourage many more artists to join the community and make Fakemon art. It's one of the biggest sources of fun in my life. I love this community so much, and I love the creativity it inspires. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. I upload new videos every single Fakemon Friday or Saturday if you live on Mirage Island, just like me. And also thank you as well to all of the channel members. I really appreciate your support. Channel memberships are open for anyone who would like to join. I don't offer exclusive members content, but I do have emotes that you can use on the channel, and you get a cool shout out at the end of each video. It's kinda sick. Okay, class dismissed.